Hello again. It's nice to see you. Like many people on this earth, I have been a viewer of reality TV and wondered if what I was seeing was an actual account of what went down or another form of scripted programming. I read an amazing book recently about reality TV that made me want to talk about this because of what we now know about people who've participated in reality shows and what it takes to create a reality environment. Reality TV as a genre asks its viewers to take what's happening on screen at face value. But after the show ends and the backlash begins, when the villain starts getting hate, that's when the cast comes out to say everything was fake. But the producers will be the first to tell you that those were really their words and everything really happened. The reality genre has been rapidly evolving since its humble beginnings in radio. At this point in time, reality TV has evolved to the point where most people who watch will have an understanding that what they're watching is contrived. But studies from the early 2000s indicate that frequent viewers are watching with the intent of identifying real moments from fake ones. One of the pioneers of reality TV was a man named Alan Funt, who created Candid Camera. He discovered that if you can knock your subjects off balance, they'll reveal a moment so shocking, so tender or surprising that it would shatter viewer skepticism. He liked to describe it as being caught in the act of being yourself. It wasn't enough to spy on people, to tape what they were saying. You also had to puncture their sense of normality somehow, to confuse or infuriate them. Only then would their mask slip, letting you see a burst of authentic emotion. This is fundamentally what viewers are looking for too, even though they understand that the setup for the moment is contrived. Producers and editors became the storytellers on reality TV. Reality as a genre was born out of a labor strike where actors and writers demanded better pay and benefits for their work. Executives discovered during these strikes that if you cut scriptwriters and actors out of the equation, you can save money and add a new element into the mix: perceived authenticity. It began with calls into radio shows. They were practically confessionals, all unscripted, all unpaid, and it created a trend of audience participation shows where viewers could call in or be invited on to express their thoughts. The backlash to early reality programming was fierce, with critics calling it vulgar and the downfall of Western civilization. The success of reality TV shows depends on whether or not the audience believes what is happening. There's an incentive to promote what's happening on screen as genuine in the hopes of forging connections with the audience. When that happens, the excitement bleeds out from social media to news outlets to think pieces and even academic journals, where viewers will debate the authenticity and the ethics of those connections. Sometimes it's a hero edit and people can root for someone, and sometimes it's a villain edit and people can lash out. Either way, it's extremely profitable. Some might define the issue as a lack of media literacy when an audience connects with a story, and the reaction is a wave of hate towards someone who received a villain edit. But the genre itself is intentionally deceptive towards its participants and its audiences in the hopes of creating something ambiguous enough to launch 1,000 ships, or discussions on whether or not that actually just happened. Viewers know enough to understand the situations are contrived, but will they ever understand what it's like to be put in the position of the cast? Holly Madison, former Playboy model and ex-girlfriend to Hugh Hefner, has spoken out about reality TV after appearing on 2 of her own shows, The Girls Next Door and Holly's World. She's spoken about the kind of contrived drama for those shows on her podcast and in interviews, where she's said fake drama always becomes real drama. Alexis Nyers is another former reality star of Pretty Wild fame and Bling Ring notoriety, who's spoken about the real-life consequences of fake drama in her book Recovering from Reality. The fights we created for the show didn't end when filming did. We were all pushed to say and do terrible things to the people we loved and became complicit. We crossed lines that didn't just disappear when the director yelled cut. Instead, we returned to real life with new resentments and injuries. In order to produce drama, we created trauma. We built these episodes on real things, on real issues from our past, conflicts, fears, and fights. Emily Nussbaum, author of Cue the Sun, The Invention of Reality TV, wrote that early reality production was utterly reliant on the innocence of its stars, their inability to understand what they were consenting to. That was the genre's secret sauce and its original sin. As reality TV became more popular and more abundant, the issue of awareness surrounding what participants were signing up for slowly improved. People had examples and even behind-the-scenes information of what being on reality TV would be like. But that doesn't mean that everyone cast in reality shows could anticipate what would happen next. In fact, the casting process specifically screens for mental illnesses and past trauma in order to find unstable contestants who can be manipulated by producers. Here's how casting for The Bachelor went down in its early seasons. Each year, there would be sweet girls, women who were portrayed as being there for the right reasons, on an open-hearted search for true love. There would also be others, scheming villains, deluded fools, and crazy-eyed stalkers. Casting director Marky Costello left after the first season, while her forming casting partner stayed on. But in her experience, no one was too off-kilter to cast. Unstable and pretty? That's gold. To help winnow them down, Costello created whiteboards with photos and mini bios, with bullet points suggesting qualities that might make the woman crack. Daddy's girl, recovering anorexic, just got dumped. From Costello's account, the producer Mike Fleiss didn't care as much about those backstories as the other top brass did. He just wanted petite blondes with big tits. Mike Fleiss denied that he cared about cup size, just beautiful blondes. Shows like Big Brother were no different in terms of casting. When Jean Jordan first caught sight of an ad for Big Brother while watching Oprah, she was working at Chic's Palace Royale, a gentleman's club in Minneapolis. She imagined that going into the house might function as a kind of free therapy. If she exposed herself to the world's judgment, she could learn from it. When a CBS psychologist called her the most honest person in the house, which was the sort of compliment that several reality cast members described getting during their psychological testing, Jordan was thrilled. Later on, she would see it all differently. Either the casting people had missed her psychological issues, among them a history of trauma, or more likely they viewed them as an asset. From her account, Jordan was deep in denial at the time, caught up in grandiose fantasies that she was the Margaret Mead of strippers. She was also struggling with undiagnosed mental illness, which expressed itself in a hollow identity and wildly shifting emotions, problems that she compensated for by erecting a false persona. Very confident, very opinionated, and very antagonistic. In ways she didn't yet understand, she was a reality producer's dream. Everyone involved in making reality TV is subjected to an environment where boundaries are pushed, crossed, stomped on, and thrown away. Crew members work well into the next day with low wages and non-existent benefits. Field producers, who are typically the ones creating the story, agree to flat rates and don't get paid for long hours on set. Daily Hagar worked on the tasks team at The Apprentice. She described working on the show as long hours with low pay, and often saw crew members snort coke to make it through the night. Sarah Gertrude Shapiro, a former field producer, has talked about how her time producing on The Bachelor consisted of extremely manipulative exchanges between herself and contestants. The low pay and long hours made the cash bonuses offered by executives a strong incentive for conniving and cruel behavior from field producers. Sarah recalled a time when she used a contestant's eating disorder to break her. Jessica Holcomb was a small-town prosecutor who had refused to do an emotional farewell interview. It was 4 a.m., after a 5-hour rose ceremony shoot. Shapiro said, "Jessica, I cannot let you go. I mean it. I'll edit you like you're fucking crazy because you don't have an exit." Jessica wouldn't crack, so Shapiro turned the screws, using her knowledge about the Bachelorette's eating disorder. Jessica, a 25-year-old who had gone on the show after her engagement broke up, began sobbing. Jessica revealed the magic words Shapiro said to get her to break down. "You've been very honest about all the girls here being so much prettier than you, and skinnier than you, and better than you. How does it feel to know that you were right?" The editors tied that footage to a shot in which she seemed to claw at the Bachelor's shoulder, and edit that made her look like a hysterical stalker. During filming, Jessica had trusted the producers entirely, so when they urged her to be more affectionate to the Bachelor, she gave them the footage that looked like clawing. Creators of reality TV like Alan Funt have said that you can't just turn a camera on somebody, and that you had to stir things up in order to make them interesting enough for TV. Real-world co-creators Mary Ellis Bunham and John Murray called it throwing pebbles in the pond when they contrive drama through planted items or information. Survivor co-creator Duncan Gray described a different kind of contrived act, one where the setting influences the events. He called it situationalism, building an artificial setting so self-contained, a story was forced to bloom inside of it, like a bonsai tree. While situationalism can apply to Survivor, it also applies to shows like Love Island, where contestants are living in a shared home totally cut off from the outside world. They aren't allowed their phones, any outside contact, or even entertainment like TV, books, or magazines. The intent, especially with dating shows like Love Island, is to isolate contestants from anything and everything beyond the love interest and the game. Less distractions means less to occupy your mind away from the objective, and past dating show contestants have expressed how this situationalism inspired behavior in them that they would not have otherwise displayed. But it wasn't the environment alone. Productions often freely supplied alcohol and even encouraged binge drinking by removing food options and limiting water, according to a lawsuit against Netflix show Love is Blind. Frequent viewers of reality shows like dating competitions are familiar with the heavy alcohol intake on these shows, and how it's often a staple of reality TV. According to Jeremy Hartwell's lawsuit, at times, defendants left members of the cast alone for hours at a time with no access to a phone, food, or any other type of contact with the outside world until they were required to return to working on the production. The lawsuit also alleges that the three companies further controlled the cast by restricting food and drink at all hours of the day, and regularly refused timely food and water to the cast while on set, severely restricting the availability of hydration opportunities. Even at the hotel living quarters, food was restricted to the point of severe hunger. Defendants, having knowledge of the fact that cast members at times would be starving, instructed the hotel staff to not provide food to any cast member that asked them, in a clear effort to ensure that the cast would continue to be deprived of food outside of the presence of the production team. Hartwell's lawsuit claims that the only drinks the companies regularly provided to the cast were alcoholic beverages, soft drinks, energy drinks, and mixers. Allegedly, beverages like water were strictly limited to the cast during the day. The document also alleges that the companies encouraged the cast members to consume alcohol throughout the entire day, and that they were plied with an unlimited amount of alcohol without meaningful or regular access to appropriate food and water to moderate their inevitable drunkenness. The combination of sleep deprivation, isolation, lack of food, and an excess of alcohol, all either required, enabled, or encouraged by the defendants, contributed to inhumane working conditions and an altered mental state for the cast. For people like Leah McSweeney, an ex-Real Housewives of New York season 12 and 13 cast member, her struggle with alcohol became a plot point of the show. She was told by producers in her first season that she was being super boring, so she got really drunk and threw a tiki torch during a scene, which became a big hit online. After her seasons on the show, she checked herself into an inpatient treatment and stopped drinking. Then she was cast in a Housewives spin-off called Ultimate Girls Trip. Before filming started for Ultimate Girls Trip, she received a text from a cast member telling her, "I wish you were still drinking." While auditioning, McSweeney told producers, "I'm drinking again, but it's fine." She says she had been sober for almost a decade up to that point, and she describes this moment as her first attempt to minimize her substance abuse issues with Bravo. More than a month later, on an early September cast trip to the Hamptons, McSweeney began drinking again. McSweeney told the cameras, "I don't consider myself an alcoholic at all. I've been drinking for the last 6 months or so, and I pick and choose when I drink." McSweeney now says she was trying to keep her relapse from becoming a storyline on the show. McSweeney says that co-showrunner Darren Ward had warned her, "This shit is boring as hell, and you better turn it up." So McSweeney turned it up. She drank, and took off her clothes, and wearing only a thong, threw a lit tiki torch across Ramona Singer's lawn. She says she doesn't remember that evening because she was browned out. But when the episode aired in April 2020, McSweeney as Hurricane Leia was instantly iconic. McSweeney says that in April 2020, during an off-air exchange on Watch What Happens Live, Andy Cohen asked her, "Were you already drinking? Or was your relapse at the winery on the trip?" She told him she wasn't dry when filming began, hoping to de-emphasize it. She believes that Andy Cohen looked disappointed that the exact moment of McSweeney's relapse wouldn't be documented on the show. McSweeney says that the only time production intervened in her own drinking was when fellow castmate Ramona Singer complained to producers that McSweeney had been too disruptive while filming in Rhode Island. While the season was airing, McSweeney says that Shannon told her, "I just think there was such a stark difference between you when you were drinking versus this season, and that's why the audience kind of didn't like you." McSweeney got a text from fellow Ultimate Girls Trip cast member Marisol Patton before filming began. It said, "I support your sobriety, obviously, and I could never do what you do because I don't have your willpower, but I marvel at what you've done." And then, "But on that note, I wish you were still drinking. That's all." Patton told Vanity Fair, "Yes, I sent that text message. There was a collective memory of the girl running around throwing tiki torches and skinny dipping, and that is who I was hoping to go on vacation with." Though McSweeney was vocally sober, cast member Heather Gay asked McSweeney if she was drinking, and then said, "Let's get Leia drunk." Another cast member, Giselle Bryant, said to McSweeney, "If you drank this week, would that be a big deal?" McSweeney then texted the co-showrunner Darren Ward and asked him, "Did you guys push Giselle to talk about this stuff with me? It's so odd." Darren Ward wrote back, "No, we did not." McSweeney told him, "I don't need people trying to undermine my sobriety." To which Ward responded, "Get out of your head." While alcohol flowed freely and was often shown to the audience, the drugs that flowed behind the scenes also accelerated storylines for the cameras. Steve Uncles got his first job in reality TV as a coordinator on a Jackass spin-off, Viva La Bam, which starred Bam Margera and his family. The job wore him down. Their star had bipolar disorder and addictions that were spinning out of control. The crew, like Uncles, was young and working 12 to 14-hour days. His own pay wasn't bad, $1,600 a week. But there were cast members who were underpaid, and sometimes unpaid. And Chris Rabb, who played the crazed character Rabb himself, kept getting injured, each recovery sinking him deeper into painkiller abuse. Uncles saw legs broken, and a lot worse stuff than that, as the drugs deepened, along with the personal drama. When a backflip went wrong, professional motocross performer Brian Deegan lost a kidney and 4 pints of blood. There were no EMTs around. Although Deegan sued MTV, he lost. Maybe because, according to Uncles, the production had audio of someone telling Deegan, "Don't do this if you don't want to." In an effort to revamp Big Brother after the first season, producers did everything in their power to turn the show into a soap opera-style house of debauchery. But in their pursuit of drama for the show, they overlooked the safety of their contestants. 10 days in, the housemates were getting hammered, peeing on the walls of the house, and, according to one of the show's story editors, Daniel Schreiber, using NyQuil to get high. Then, late one night, Justin Siebick, a bartender from New Jersey, started making out in the kitchen with Krista, a single mom from Louisiana, when suddenly Justin brandished a kitchen knife. Justin had begun mock-threatening Krista, holding the knife to her throat as they flirted, asking her, "Would you get mad if I killed you?" and then kissing her. Even if Justin meant that threat as a joke, as he would later claim, it was a really dark one. The producers removed him from the game immediately. After the show, newspapers reported Justin's 2002 assault conviction, where he had broken his girlfriend's ankle and choked her hard enough to leave marks. The crew on reality sets were not exempt from the onslaught of abuse. Jude Wang told Emily Nussbaum about a day on Celebrity Mole when, after a stunt involving coffins buried in sand didn't pan out, her producer turned bright red and then leapt over an open coffin and tried to choke her. "I'm much bigger than him, so I wasn't even afraid. It was like a kitten scrabbling up at me," she joked. Back then, the incident didn't seem worth reporting. There were no unions, so who am I going to complain to? To HR? There was no HR. And there is no HR to report incidents to on set, and there are no union protections for reality laborers. Attempts to unionize in the past have left reality crews blacklisted from work, like with story editor Daniel Shriver. Shriver joined the Writers Guild of America, the WGA, Reality Organizing Committee, which found egregious code violations everywhere they looked. From time cards that simply read "worked," no matter how long the hours, to empty titles, which were often handed out in lieu of decent treatment. Sleep-deprived workers were forced to drive for hours to get home, risking their lives. Many people, among them Shriver himself, had struggled with on-set abuse, including sexual harassment. Reality workers tended to be young, single, and childless, without the advantages of their scripted TV peers like family money or connections. But mostly, they'd been trained to view nightmarish workplace conditions as normal, to take pride in simply surviving their jobs. In May 2005, Patrick Verone, then president of WGA West, held a big meeting for people who worked in alternative TV genres, including animation and reality. Around 400 people showed up, an impressive turnout since everyone who attended risked getting fired or blacklisted. Ultimately, though, the meeting got heated. Some reality workers expressed doubts about describing themselves as writers, while others were worried that pushing for better pay would kill the genre entirely. For me, worrying that demanding actual pay and benefits for the work that was already being done would kill the reality genre really just exposes how the only way these shows existed was by finding a loophole to avoid paying people for their work in the first place. It was purposefully exploitative. The WGA did not actually view reality labor as deserving of the same benefits. The way most WGA writers saw it, the genre was the enemy, a wedge networks used to resist union demands, first in 1988 when the WGA struck for 22 weeks, and then again in 2001. If reality laborers suffered, maybe they deserved to. When Verone opened the floor, Osborne's field producer Charles Kramer stood up to confront him. The WGA was working in bad faith, he argued. They wanted to swell the WGA's numbers to help increase their negotiating power, but they had no intention of following through and fighting for their rights. Real writers, scripted writers that is, would never stand in solidarity with field producers from The Bachelor. And then he stormed out. Charles Kramer, in the end, was right. Patrick Verone promised picketers that they'd be in the new contract, describing reality labor as, among other things, crucial leverage for the future if WGA writers hoped to prevent an army of non-guild writers from taking over. Instead, the WGA wound up dropping improved conditions for reality workers from their list of demands shortly after contract negotiations started. Big Brother producer John Kroll, who supported the cause but was wary of the union's promises, felt disgusted. Like, if you're gonna do it, but don't get a bunch of people to risk their jobs and then sacrifice them. And yet, there are those who work in reality TV crews that wear their ability to survive in that environment as a badge of honor. Ben Hatta was another producer on the set of The Bachelor who confirms many of Sarah Gertrude Shapiro's experiences, but doesn't believe there's a need for change in the industry. He admired Shapiro's drive, but he didn't share her interest in industry reform, because the way Hatta saw it, reality TV was inseparable from, and in fact defined by, its brutal labor conditions. He considered it a badge of honor to have handled those awful hours, the low pay, and the pressure. In his view, the only sensible way to survive reality TV is to climb upward. All the money's at the top, all the power's at the top, so I don't care about what's happening here, I'm gonna go there. It seems like the facade of reality TV extends far beyond the relationship to its audience. There's an idea that people who sign up for reality shows know what they're getting into. But there's a really flimsy aspect of consent in reality TV where production will have talent sign contracts that in some cases restricts them from leaving the show early by instating a fine, like in Love is Blind, where the fine is $50,000 for leaving. These contracts also ensure that the production company is not liable for conflicts that arise from filming, and ensure that on-screen talent has no recourse to avoid exploitative filming tactics like Frankenbites, a type of editing where dialogue of cast members' lines are cut together using different pieces of audio from several takes or days of filming.
This recording I made of you. Hi, I'm Timmy Turner, and I
cheated on my math test.
I never cheated on my math test. Hi, I'm Timmy Turner, and I cheated on my math test.
The contracts state that the talent agrees to forfeit all control of their footage and editing, which essentially silences any pushback regarding things like spliced footage or audio. In an especially egregious example, the show Joe Millionaire featured a scene where the fake millionaire and a woman vying for his affection walk off into a forest together, and then while they're out of view of the cameras, audio was edited in that made the scene sound like Joe Millionaire and the contestant were having sex. In that case, the answer to did that really happen should be no, because the pair did not have sex. But the audio and footage were real because none of it was created by production, simply edited together in a very misleading way.
Evan Marriott, star of the hit reality show Joe Millionaire, sneaks off into the woods with contestant Sarah Kozer. Here's what happened next.
No escaping it.
It's one of the most scandalous scenes in the history of reality television. But according to Sarah Kozer, it never happened.
I don't think that I have ever been so furious at anything in my entire life.
Despite producers and editors admitting that this was not something that actually happened, there are still people who fully believe from this scene that oral sex in fact took place. And even just these YouTube comments on that very video alone, there are people that you won't be able to convince that there was misleading editing at play. There are many editors who were interviewed by Emily Nussbaum for her book who have said that they refused to participate in Frankenbites and scenes that were essentially created through editing rather than actually unfolding on screen. But Joe Millionaire editor Josh Belson is not one of those people. Your morals kind of go out the window. They don't really play into it. You're given this new tool. This is gonna make our job so much easier by being these evil liars, Belson told me with a laugh. This kind of cynicism is not uncommon amongst those who create reality TV, like the producers of Alexis Nyers' show Pretty Wild. There's a clip from the Bling Ring documentary, The Real Bling Ring Hollywood Heist, in episode 2 that features producers Jennifer Gardner and Amber Mazzola. The clip shows the producers laughing and introducing themselves as people who ruin lives.
My name is Jennifer Gardner. I'm an executive producer, showrunner.
My name is Amber Mazzola, and I ruin people's lives.
For anyone unfamiliar, the concept of Pretty Wild was to follow the lives of the Arlington family, a family consisting of a single mother and her 3 daughters, living in Los Angeles and finding entertainment career opportunities for her daughters. I think it's also important to mention the ages of the young women that were on this show. Alexis Nyers was 18 at the time, Tess Taylor was 19, and Alexis's younger sister Gabby was 15 years old at the time of filming. Alexis Nyers and Tess Taylor were the 2 main characters, and they gained national notoriety when they were identified as members of Los Angeles' teenage burglar ring, the Bling Ring. Though the show was offered to the family before the Bling Ring connection was made, the storyline became the overall arc of the season. Both Alexis and Tess were addicted to opiates at the time of filming, and Alexis has described how her more emotional moments on the show were fueled by that addiction. I think this clip of the producers laughing is extremely telling, as they know what the consequences of their show were, and they now know that the people they were putting on TV were going through addiction, and they know what made for popular reality television. They created the storylines on the show. It seems to me very obvious that they understood the exploitation behind the show and were motivated by the money to tell a story that did not paint anyone in front of the camera in a good light. Obviously, you don't have to feel anything towards these participants, but many of these producers have said that the audience have wanted to see these things on screen, and that's why they show it. But I think that audiences want to see all kinds of shit that they shouldn't, like someone's dead body, for example, and that just because the interest is there doesn't mean that people in charge have to abide by it. In fact, there have been times when producers have chosen not to air something that will paint their cast in a bad light because it will go against the narrative that they've built, which was the case for Donald Trump and his show, The Apprentice. There were several instances where he would make disgusting remarks about women competing on the show, and racist remarks about black contestants. He even went so far as to refuse to name Kwame Jackson, a black contestant, the winner of the show. One might say that the point of reality TV is not to tell a true story, but rather to tell an entertaining one at any cost. To exhibit the lives of others in the manner that they did, and then call it reality TV, is intentionally deceptive. But reality TV is really a spectrum, where shows that include an aspect of competition like Survivor or Top Chef require less stones in the pond and more situationalism. Shows where the environment influences the events on screen rather than producers can fall on the lower end of the spectrum, where it's minimally contrived, versus the higher end, where it's extremely contrived. Now, defining what's real on camera is a frustrating and ambiguous task. If you are put into a setting where you act in a manner that is totally different from how you might act in your own setting, is that still real? If you're deprived of food and water, instigated into conflict, and provoked until you react strongly, is that still real? Regardless of whether the events on screen are real, the consequences of being on reality TV are definitely real. People like Jessica Simpson with her show The Newlyweds have discussed how after the show ended, that feeling of being recorded never went away. Her and her then husband Nick Lachey would often go outside to speak privately, despite the absence of the cameras. This is a sentiment repeated by Evan Marriott, the winner of Joe Millionaire. Hyped up on hollow egotism, spiked with paranoia, a sensation that lingered after the offers stopped coming. Even though people could have cared less if I got a hamburger or a haircut, I kept thinking years after the show, somebody's at my window, somebody's taking pictures of me, somebody gives a shit what I'm wearing somebody gives a shit what I'm wearing today. I talked myself into this, and some of it was true, some wasn't, but it took me a while to talk myself out of it. Xian Huang was a contestant on Survivor, and spoke in an interview about that lingering sensation that someone is there.
I had kind of PTSD after I got off the show, and I would imagine that cameras were like, wake up in the middle of the night and I'd see the blue light of the night camera.
Despite the knowledge viewers of reality TV have of a performance in front of the cameras, the performance itself is a kind of high-endurance, long-term masking that requires a lot of energy to maintain. Which is probably why many viewers look for those real moments that break through. There is an understanding that no one can keep up the facade for very long. I loved reading Emily Nussbaum's book, Cue the Sun, because of how much time it covered while dissecting the history of reality TV. People like Candid Camera creator Alan Funt wrote in his memoir that the things he did were purely for the contribution of the understanding of human behavior. Funt argued throughout his life that he wasn't trying to upset his listeners, his goal was merely to capture human nature in all its variations, ugly and beautiful. John Crosby was a radio critic who foreshadowed the evolution of reality TV after listening to Funt's radio program Candid Microphone. The Candid Microphone was, I suppose, inevitable. It all started, as I see it, when the first audience participant stepped to the microphone and announced belligerently that he was from Brooklyn. It got a laugh then, and at first, that was all that was needed. But Brooklyn palled eventually, and it became necessary to pelt the Brooklyn man with eggs, to put him in his wife's house dress, to send him to Alaska to search for gold. That was what you might describe as the age of the voluntary amateur. And as insane as it sounds, calling reality TV a social experiment in the understanding of human behavior is what led to two of the most famous and least ethical social experiments on human behavior. Alan Funt inspired the work of Stanley Milgram in 1961, a Yale professor who had volunteers give electric shocks to students in an obedience experiment where the students pretended to be in pain after volunteers were told to deliver increasingly potent electric shocks. Alan's work also inspired Philip Zimbardo, the man who created the 1971 Stanford prison experiment, where volunteers were separated into prisoners and guards in a closed environment to test situational variables on human behavior. Much of the concepts used in reality TV shows include an aspect of social experimentation because they require participants to be removed from their normal lives and placed in an artificial setting with extremely controlled variables. This is a big reason why counseling is now made available for some reality TV show participants after the show's ending. But counseling for participants is still a new concept and was notably absent in early seasons of shows like Big Brother, The Bachelor, Survivor, and The Real World. In fact, the psychological evaluations given to participants were never intended for their care and safety, rather for the express purpose of choosing a cast of characters that would conflict with one another. There is so much to be said about this topic, and I would really love to know your thoughts about reality TV shows. I haven't even gotten into everything there is to talk about here because there's just too many different rabbit holes to explore at one time. For example, racism on reality TV and stereotyping, or how The Apprentice got Donald Trump elected president. I'd love to keep talking about this, but I think I'm going to make another video to really dive into the specifics. Thank you all for watching, and have a great day!